Welcome back to our nearly 2 million listeners, Mojo 50 Radio. That is our iHeart station, where you can find us every single day, weekdays, Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern, as well as broadcasting live all over social media. We're newly over to Rumble now because we've been canceled by YouTube. And so I wear it like a badge of honor. As promised, as staunch supporters of the police, we are proud to welcome, for the first time on PC Radio, former Sheriff David Clarke, Milwaukee County. Get his book, Cop Under Fire. Go to his website, americassheriff.com. Sheriff, thanks for being here, first of all. We're seeing video after video, post after post of cops in democratically controlled cities showing up at businesses, shutting them down, arresting managers and owners, serving cease and desist orders for being in violation of these COVID mandates. We are fervent supporters of cops, like I mentioned, but it feels like these elected representatives are weaponizing the police against the American small business owner. What do you make of all this?
Well, first of all, people can also follow me on Parler, the social media site, and the handle is @SheriffClarke, and it's Clarke, Clarke.
Wonderful.
You know, I'm hearing many of the stories that you are hearing, and I find it outrageous, as do most freedom-loving Americans. And I think what's interesting here is that you indicated that law enforcement is being weaponized to go after, you know, what are really law-abiding activities, lawful activities, I should say. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a slippery slope. I really do. For police commanders, I'm not talking about the rank and file frontline officers. They're under orders. They're just following orders. It's a command and control structure. But I'm talking about the police executives who are allowing their agencies to be used in this fashion. Look, when this first thing was first designed, law enforcement, we were peace officers. That's right. What we were, you know, our primary function was to keep the peace. And then that developed over time. I understand that. However, they're being used almost in a brown shirt like fashion for these onerous, I think offensive, I think government overreach because of a pandemic. The Constitution is very clear. I'm first and foremost about the Constitution. All right. To me, nothing else matters in a constitutional republic. So we have this document, and it was created to limit government's ability to be able to use power, government power, to abuse citizens. And that's exactly what's going on here. I never thought I'd be saying that as a former law enforcement officer for nearly 40 years. Right. You know, when I'm looking at this and I'm saying, I don't even recognize some of the activity, including things like stand down orders during riots. I don't even recognize this profession sometimes. So, you know, here we are. And what do? Well, we got to push back. I never thought I'd be saying that either. You know, when you got officers going to business establishments, businesses already only small businesses, they operate on the margins anyway. Most of these people aren't getting super rich off running a small business. They're employing people, they're providing a service, people come in, they want that service, they're willing to pay for it. And now you have all these restrictions, can't have more than 25% occupancy, can't have this, can't have that. And, you know, it makes you wonder, those are administrative codes. And it makes you wonder at a time like this, maybe we need to revisit this in terms of licensing. Why do you need a license, you know, to run a restaurant, to sell alcohol for? Because that's what they're holding over people's heads now with these small businesses. Yeah. They're licensed, whether it be a barber or a beautician or whatever. So I think we have to look at that as well. But it's not uncommon at a time like this, and they're using this pandemic as an excuse. There is no, you know this, there is no section of the Constitution that allows for it to be suspended because of a pandemic. I don't care how well-intentioned government is. I just don't care about that. I care about individual freedom. So when I hear governors and mayors say, hey, you know, we're trying to keep everybody safe. Okay, you know what, just give me the information. I'm adult. Right. I'm an adult.
Yeah.
Most adults can figure it out, you know, how to take reasonable precautions. But when you start handing down edicts, you know, even it's reached inside our home now. And that's the thing that bothers me. It's one thing in the streets, they said, hey, you know, wear your mask in the street, so on and so forth. But now they're telling us inside our home.
Ridiculous.
We can only have so many people. We have to wear masks. Inside our home at Thanksgiving, we have to socially distance. I mean, this is obscene. And that's why I call it offensive. So it's time for people to push back. I've instructed people. I said, if a state official backed by law enforcement comes to your home knocking on the door to check for compliance of COVID, don't answer and don't let them in. All right, talk through the door. Can I help you? Yeah, we're here. We think we see a number of cars out in the driveway, and we want to make sure that you're within the compliance rules, and tell them, go get a warrant. There's a reason why this Constitution was drawn up, and it's under the Fourth Amendment. The Founding Fathers wanted to be very clear that people had a right to be secure in their homes, their houses, their personal effects, their papers, so on and so forth, from unreasonable searches and seizures. So that's why I said, tell law enforcement, go get a warrant. Go get a search warrant. If they come back with one, I highly doubt that they'll get one in these circumstances. If they come back with one, make them do a forced entry and have your video camera running, because that would be a great scene to put out there as to how much overreach and how obnoxious these rules are.
Yeah, it's tyrannical.
Very well said, Sheriff. It's funny you say that. My father was a 24-year veteran of the St. Paul Police Department, and he was just in town recently, and he said the same thing you did. He said, I don't even recognize this job anymore. Yeah. And speaking of St. Paul, over the weekend, just outside of our governor's mansion, there was a group of patriots that were protesting the shutdowns and the stay-at-home orders and all this other stuff. And surprise, surprise, Antifa showed up to counter-protest. The Antifa members damaged dozens of vehicles, spray painted the windows, slashed the tires, carved the anarchist symbols in the sides of the hoods and the cars, right in front of the police. The police just stood by and watched it happen. Why would do you think that crime is being legalized for criminals, and why do you think that might be?
Well, I don't think it's being legalized. I think it's being tolerated, for heaven's sakes. I would never give a stand down order. I was the sheriff of a very large urban metropolitan county, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, county of about 1 million people. Mm-hmm. And I had to oversee an anti-riot operation back in 2015, I think it was. And I made it clear to my officers that they had all of my authority reasonably to keep the peace, to protect life and property. That included use of tear gas, rubber bullets, less lethal type, up to including deadly force if it's called for to handle that situation. And you don't have many police commanders like that. You have a few left, mainly sheriffs. You don't have any police chiefs. I don't think any that have that sort of mindset. So you put these officers out in harm's way. They're on the front lines. You get rocks thrown at them, bottles with frozen water inside, other projectiles, and they're just taking this abuse. And I also want to mention something going back to what we originally started talking about. This is a slippery slope for law enforcement, because we're only as successful as the community will cooperate with us. And right now, the community needs us on their side in these dangerous times. And what they're seeing out of police in terms of coming in, being officious, counting heads, arresting people. I have 3 stories, I'm doing a piece right now on this, 3 stories of people who were arrested at public venues because they wouldn't put a mask on. Now they were arrested because they wouldn't leave. But again, the premise was you're not wearing a mask. So you see what cops are doing, handing people citations. Wait until the next time the police in that community need the public's help. You know what the public's going to do? They're going to turn their back on them and say, when we needed you, you weren't with us. We're not interested in helping you. And that's, I think, the slippery slope. Police have enough enemies as it is. We don't need any more enemies, for heaven's sakes. We have all these anarchist groups. We have these cop-hating groups. We have politicians who've gotten on board with the cop haters. They're cutting police budgets. And now we're up there taking their side. I mean, this is what I don't think these police commanders are thinking about. So, with this, what happened in St. Cloud there, St. Paul, I should say. It was St. Paul or St. Paul?
Yeah, St. Paul, Sheriff.
St. Paul.
St. Paul. What happened there? When it's time to fight back. I'll tell you what, I'm not going to stand by as a citizen in the absence of police action and watch somebody damage my car. No, what I do has to be reasonable. But you know what? I'm not going to put up with it.
Right. And more and more of this is happening in these specifically liberal Democrat-controlled cities. And speaking of that, moving to the election, it's my opinion the 2020 presidential election was stolen away from Donald Trump, but more importantly from Americans, Sheriff, like you and me. In a recent interview that I saw you do, you said, quote, all of Donald Trump's voters are being disenfranchised by this fraud. It's no doubt that you see the irregularities here, and it's, in your opinion, is it too late for the president and too late for America? Do elections even matter anymore?
Well, it's never too late. And I always remind people that this fight for freedom and liberty has no finish line. It's always ongoing. It's always a work in progress. Sure, there are dates now that, the election officials are bumping up against. That's something I think that the courts can sort out. But at the same time, no matter what happens, until the irregularities are settled in my mind and in all of Donald Trump's, and including the people who didn't vote for him, in their minds, we have to sort through these irregularities and try to get to the bottom of them. Otherwise, like you said, elections will no longer matter.
Yeah, I mean,
it's funny that how the left.
Go
it's
ahead.
funny how the left, when it comes to things like, they say the pandemic. Well, we got to try to save every life. If we can only save one life, guess what? One illegal vote, one, not millions, one disenfranchises me.
Yeah.
My ancestors
Agreed.
came over here as slaves. They gave blood, sweat, and tears to have the Constitution apply to them. And the right to, that included the right to vote. So they fought for my right to be able to vote. I'm not going to turn this back that easily and say, well, you know what? Well, we lost this one, we'll go to the next one. My ancestors would be aghast if they knew I was willing to walk away from having my vote disenfranchised.
Yeah. Or just physically removed or kicked out, like the poll watchers that were kicked out of polling places, denied reasonable access to observe the counting of votes and ballots. It seems the Democrats aren't even trying to hide their scandalous and devious agenda anymore. Do you see it the same way? Help us make some sense of this lack of transparency that's going on.
Well, you can't make any sense of it, but it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
I think what's transparent is the fact that the Democrats are trying to hide something.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they would be more transparent. You don't kick out election inspectors. The law is very clear, and it's different in each state. But just about every state, it says that you can have election inspectors. Okay, they have a right by law to be there, and to kick them out. I mean, the thing that bothers me about this is not just what the left and the Democrats are doing, but that the courts are turning a blind eye to it. If the state law says very clearly elections inspectors can observe and they're kicked out, then the law is violated. Now, what the remedy is for the courts, but for the courts to just sit up there and go, well, no, nothing to see here, move along, I find quite remarkable.
I had a few other questions for you. I know that you're a busy guy and we're running up against a hard break, but the cheat appears to be on again in Georgia. This thing is coming up here. Super important that we hold on to Georgia. Do we need to ensure this runoff is conducted with integrity? And what do we need? What can we do? I mean, so many Americans are saying we can't let this happen. What happened to the president happened down in Georgia. What do you think we can do about this?
Well, we know how they cheat, right?
Yeah.
We know their tactics. And so you have to have a front line of defense before the election, not scurrying afterwards. In some of these states, they came up, they were a little late to the punch. Like in Arizona, all of a sudden you go as they're counting and you start getting your ducks in a row. We know they're going to cheat. We know how they cheat. So you have to have those defenses up front, calling them on it, and in real time, running into court, do the best you can with these courts that don't seem to want to enforce the law. And you have to try to get injunctions. You have to try to block things as they're happening in real time, not afterwards. Very hard to undo an election.
Yeah. Sheriff David Clarke. What was the Parler handle again, Sheriff?
At Sheriff Clarke, and it's Clarke, Clarke. Gotta put the E on the end.
Yes, and Sheriff Clarke says America has become increasingly divided and polarized in recent years with growing racial tension, animosity toward law enforcement professionals, government corruption, and the disregard for the constitutional process. There seems to be no easy answer in sight. But Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clarke knows where we must begin. We must stop blaming others, look at our problems with open eyes, and take ownership of our family, community, and country and turn to God for solutions. It's all in Sheriff Clarke's book, Cop Under Fire, Moving Beyond Hashtags of Race, Crime, and Politics for a Better America. Get it everywhere that you can get a book. Also, go to his website, americassheriff.com, for everything truth relating to policing in today's climate. Sheriff Clarke, a real pleasure to have you. I hope you'll come back.
My pleasure.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you, Sheriff. Merry Christmas.
More PC Radio coming up right after this. Don't go anywhere. My name is Stu. That's Rich.
The PC Radio Show with Stu and Rich. Back in a minute.
People